Masechet Gittin Daf Yod Zayin. We're going to get to the next Mishnah, which is about writing a date on the get. But first, we have a great story. Rabba bar bar Hana halash. Ul legabe Rav Yehuda v'Rabba l'shayu lebe. So Rabba bar Hana, he is a third generation Amora, a student of Rabbi Yochanan, and he was sick. And so his colleagues, Rav Yehuda and Rabba, they went to visit him. That's very nice. They're living in Bavel. באו מיני שניים שהביאו גט מידת הים, סריחין שאמרו בפנינו נכתב, בפנינו נחתם, או אין סריחין. And so they ask him, what are you going to do when you visit, when three rabbis visit each other? They're not talking about the weather and how good the food is in the hospital. They're going to talk about halacha. So they take the opportunity to ask Rabba bar Hana a question. If two messengers bring a get from a foreign land to Israel, do they have to say the special formula, or do they not have to say it? We've discussed this in the past, right? It will depend in part on what's the reason for saying the formula. If the whole reason for saying the formula is only to ratify the signatures, so then they would not have to say it because you have two people here, and so they can ratify the signatures anytime. But if you say it's because of lishma, then they should need to say it. Soma lehem en srichin. His answer was no, they don't have to. Ma ilu yomedu b'fanenu girsha mi lo mehemne. And his reasoning is, if these two witnesses would come and say that she was divorced in our presence, we would believe them, right? So they can testify any time and say, yes, we saw the get being delivered, and that would ratify the get, and so there's no need for them to say the formula. Good. In the meantime, it so happened that a certain Persian priest, a Chabara, this comes from the Torah, Chober Haver, a magician. This is referring to a Zoroastrian priest. Shakla l'sharga u'mikamayhu amar Hamana o betula debar Esav. And this Zoroastrian priest took away their lamp. Apparently it was night, and they had a lamp in the room, which makes sense, right? We light a lamp for a sick person, and he has visitors, and it makes them feel calm and safe. And now the Persian priest took it away. Why did the Zoroastrian priest take it away? Well, because they worship fire. And this may have been one of the nights where they had a special Zoroastrian festival, and so they had made a special fire in the temple, and they disallow fires anywhere else in the land. And so they said, this is an illegal fire, and they took it away. We see things like this regarding Chanukah, when they weren't allowed to light Chanukah outside, they had to bring it inside in Bavel, probably related to the same thing. So Rabba bar Hana, who actually was from Eretz Yisrael, a student of Rabbi Yochanan in Israel, but now he was in Bavel, he said Rachamana, right, calling upon Harachaman. Either we should live in your shadow, in other words, the best would be if we had sovereignty in our own country, and we could live directly under Hashem, and if not, then better to be under Esav, meaning under the Romans, right? So the Romans, they don't do things like this. They do other bad things and whatever, but they destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, okay, which was terrible, and killed many people in 3 different revolts. So not that life under the Romans was so great, but those were historical incidents. By this time, they were talking about the late 3rd century, so those events were over 100 years ago. And so the Romans generally, they were fair, right? If you followed their rules, then they allowed people to do what they wanted. And so at least during this time, he felt that being under the Romans would be better than being under the Persians, because look how we can't even have a lamp in our room to make us feel better. Okay, so that's the end of that story. And then we ask, hold on, this is according to that, what Abba just said, Roman rule is better than Persian rule? Is that true? Elohim hevin darka v'hu yada et mekoma, yodea kadosh baruch hu b'Yisrael she'en yecholin lekabel gezerat romiyim, amad ve'egla otam leBavel. Here we have a baraita from Rabbi Chaya, that quotes a pasuk in Yov that says God understands its way, He knows its place, meaning the Torah. Where is the proper place for Torah and for the Jewish community to live? And so Hashem knows regarding the Jewish people that they're not going to be able to live under Roman decrees. Roman decrees are terrible, and therefore Hashem did a favor to the Jewish people and exiled them to Bavel, because under Bavel they won't be under Roman rule, they'll be under Persian rule, which is not as bad as Roman rule. So here we have a contradiction, because Rabbah said better to be under the Romans than the Persians, and this Baraita says better to be under the Persians than the Romans. And the answer is La kashya ha mikameh denetu chabare lebabel ha lebata datu chabare lebabel. The Baraita is talking about before the Zoroastrian priests came to Bavel. Before that, then living under Bavel was pretty good, and this is true under the Parthians, the Parthian Empire, and then the beginning of the Sasanian Empire. In Persia, the Zoroastrians were not strong, and so they were pretty pluralistic and had religious freedom, semi-autonomy the Jewish community enjoyed. And so it was, in fact, better in Bavel during that time than in Rome, because in Rome during that time, under Roman rule, that's when the rebellions happened, Bar Kokhba revolt, and so on. So yes, during that entire history, this is a Baraita. So during the Tannaitic period, in fact, it was better to live under Bavel than under the Persian Empire than under the Roman Empire. However, things switched when the Zoroastrians came to Bavel. When did that happen? We could actually date the likely event. We're talking here about this guy named Kartir, who was a very powerful and influential Zoroastrian priest, and especially under Bahram II, who was the Sasanian Persian emperor, he allowed Kartir to go ahead and pass all kinds of laws against other religions and made Zoroastrianism very, very powerful. So this is right here you see, accepted the throne, and with the aid of powerful Zoroastrian priest, powerful Zoroastrian priest Kartir. So they worked together, and so this has happened around 274 or later 280s, which is right around the time of Rabbah bar Hana. And so it makes sense that these things would coincide, and at that point already, better to be under Rome than under Persian rule. All right, fantastic story. We get to kind of witness this historical shift noted in the Talmud itself, in the Talmud Bavli, where the Amoraim are actually there and living it. And we're lucky that we have this story. It was brought in just by the way, because it happens to be when they visited him, they talked about our topic, when do two people have to say the formula, and it just so happened that that's just exactly when the candle was taken away. So this historical record is also recorded alongside. All right, back to this topic of two messengers and them saying the formula. Let's analyze the end of the Mishnah. If you have one person say it was written in front of me, and two people say it was signed in front of us, the Mishnah rules that that's okay. We're going to have to discuss now, are they messengers or are they not messengers? Simple reading is that, well, there's two people here, so two people can always ratify the document. And so let's see how the Gemara explains it. We're going to see two different versions of what Rabbi Yochanan said, each opposing the other. Amar Rabbi Ameh, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shenu ela shaget yosem mitachad yad ketiva, tenasu kishnayim al ze uchshnayim al ze. Ava mitachad yedeh ayad hatima pasul. So in this first version, Rabbi Ameh says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this law is true only when the Ed Kitiba, the one that says it was written in front of me, right? There's one person says it was written in front of me. He is an agent. Since he's an agent, he has special power, right? That's the whole point of this law, that even one agent who says the formula is treated like two. And so then you have two on the Kitiva, and you also have two people saying it was signed in front of us. So then you're good. But if the messenger was not the one who said the Ed Kitiva, but rather the ed chatima, one or both of the ed chatima, that would not be sufficient. So you see, according to this statement, the purpose of the formula is to establish lishma. We have to know that it was written lishma, the reason that Rabbah had brought way back in the beginning of the Masechet. And therefore, it's not, even if you have two witnesses who are both agents saying that we saw it signed in front of us, that won't be sufficient to establish lishma. You need one person who is also an agent to say he saw it being written so that we can establish lishma. עלמא כסבר שניים שהביאו גט מדת הים, צריכים שיאמרו בפנינו נכתב בפנינו נחתם. Oh, we can derive from, based on this principle, that if there were two people and both of them were agents and they come from a foreign place, they still have to say the formula, because they have to establish that it's lishma. It's not sufficient that, oh, look, there's two agents here, so they'll be around in case we need to ratify it in the future. If it was only the reason of ratification, Rava's reason, then they wouldn't need to say the formula. So since we just established that, we need at least one agent who was there who can say, I saw it being written, that the reason that we need it lishma, and even two agents, we would need them to say the formula. אמר לרבי עשה, אלא מעתה רשע דקתני שניים אומרים בפנינו נכתב, ואחד אומר בפני נחתם פסול, ורבי יהודה מכשיר. So now Rabbi Aseh tells Rabbi Ameh, according to you, we have to be consistent. And if you say that the end of the Braita is talking about when there is one of the messengers is an ed kitiva, because we need some ed kitiva to say the formula. Well, they have to make the same assumption in the previous case, where you have two people that say it was written in front of us, and one person says it was signed, and there Rabbanan said pasul, Rabbi Yehuda said it was okay. Va'afilu get yoseh mitachat yedeh shenehen pasle Rabbanan amar le in. And so in that case, even if both of the ones who said b'fanenu nichtav were messengers, would the rabbis still say it's no good? And he said yes, that is in fact the case. The problem for Rabbanan in this case is that we have no single messenger that says the whole formula. If you have a messenger that says the whole thing, that's good. You have just one person, it's fine. But here, okay, great. You have two people, messengers, that said they saw the writing. All right, that takes care of the lishma, but we're still going to have a problem with the ratification, because here you have only one person that says that they saw the signing, and people will see that, oh, look, one person can ratify the signature, and then they may come to apply that to other documents, and so that is why Rabbanan will say it's pasul in this case. All right, all that is one version. Now, zimnin nashkeche deyativ ka'amad afilu get yosem mitachat yedeh ayad hatima kasher. At a different time, some people found Rabbi Aseh also quoting Rabbi Yochanan and saying regarding the last case of the Mishnah that even if the get comes from the edeh hatimad. Now back to the last case where there's two people that say we saw the signing and only one person that said he saw the writing, even if the guy that saw the writing is not an agent, and so his statement is actually meaningless. It would be the same if he said nothing at all. As long as you have two agents who saw the signing, that's sufficient. What you see from this version is that we don't really need the lishma clause, right? It doesn't matter if you don't have that at all. As long as you have two agents that saw the signing of it, then that would be sufficient, because two agents that are here, they can ratify the signatures anytime. So you see, according to this, we're following Rava and not Rabba, and we don't need the lishma testimony. Alma kasaba shenam sheviu get mitayam and srichin shimu fanenu nichtab ufanenu nichtam. Oh, so we can conclude from there that in fact, if two people, agents, bring the get, they don't need to say anything at all, right? In this case, they happen to say something b'fanai nichtam. Even if they didn't say anything, it would still be fine, because the whole reason why we need the formula when there's one agent is because of ratification of the signatures. If there's two agents, they can ratify it anytime, and so we don't need, therefore it's fine if even if no one says b'fanai nichtav. אמר לרבי עשה, אלא מעט הרשע דקתני שניים עומדים בפנינו נכתב, ואחד עומד בפני נחתם, פסול, ורבי יהודה מכשיר. So now Rabbi Yaseh is going to go through the same thing. Well, you have to be consistent. Also in the Resha, where you have two people that said we saw it written, and only one that says it was signed, and there we have machloket. Rabbanan say pasul, Rabbi Yosef says machshir, tama de'ena get, yosem mitachad yedei shenehem. That's only because, Rabbanan says pasul, because two of them are not messengers. Haget yosem mitachad yedei shenehem, machshire Rabbanan. That means if they if two of them were messengers, then Rabbanan would say it's valid. Is that right? Amar le'in. In fact, yes, I would agree to that. Since you have two people who are agents, so therefore they can come and ratify the document at any time. And in this version, the only reason you wouldn't need to say the formula at all is for ratification. We don't need it for lishma. And therefore, since you have two agents, even if they say nothing at all, it's totally fine. And therefore, Rabbanan would agree. If two of them are agents, then in this case and in the previous case, it would be okay. Now we ask, now they asked Rabbi Ameh, wait a second, other times we heard you saying the opposite in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Which one is it? He said this one that I said now, the second one, that's the real conclusion. This is a spike, it will not move, I'm not changing my mind anymore. I got it wrong the first time, but now I corrected it. And so the second version is the one that we should follow. All right, and now next Mishnah, a new topic. Nichtav bayom v'nechtam bayom. Balayla v'nechtam balayla. Balayla v'nechtam bayom kasher. Bayom v'nechtam balayla pasul. Rabbi Shimon machshir. So if you have a get that was written during the day and it was signed that same day, well, that's the best, right? Because then the writing, when you write it, you put a date on it and you sign it the same day and deliver it the same day. Good. If it was written at night with the date of the night and it was signed also at night, well, then that's also perfectly fine because that's the same date. And even if it was written at night and then signed and given on the next day, that's also okay because it's the same Hebrew calendar day. This day starts in the night, so the night and the next day are all the same date. So in all these three cases, the date is correct because the date of the writing is the same as the date of the signing and delivering. However, if it was written during the day and then it was not signed and delivered until the night, even if it's just, an hour later, that's a different date, right? This is the problem we always have at weddings that are around sunset. But this is here on the other end of it regarding a get. And so that kind of get would be no good because it's predated. It's written, the date on it is when it was written, but it wasn't signed and delivered until the next day. And so the date on it is not accurate. The Gemara will give two reasons why this should be a problem. Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay if to have a predated get. שהיה רבי שמעון אומר, כל הגיטין שנכתבו ביום נחתמו בלילה פסולין, חוץ מגיטי הנשים. Rabbi Shimon taught that all other documents, financial documents that are written during the day, but not signed and delivered until the night, those are problematic. Those are problematic because if it's a financial document, and you have a financial document, it's written, so you can use that document to go and collect money from someone. And if you don't have the money, you can collect from mortgage property or sold property, and then you can go and remove property. And if it's predated, then your claim will be a day earlier than someone else's claim. And so that's a problem if in fact it was written a day before the actual transaction, because I would only have claim to your mortgaged lands from the date of the transaction. And now, if it's predated, I can illegally collect from something before. Right? Or similarly, if it's a gift and I gave you a gift, you gave me a gift and now I have a document that says you gave me the gift on a certain day, but it's predated, but maybe in the meantime you also gave the gift to someone else, so we have to know who did you give the gift to first. Okay, so for financial documents, Rabbi Shimon agrees, everyone agrees, you have to have the correct day. But Gittin Nashim, not so, because you can't collect something based on a Get Nashim. The Ketubah, the obligation for the Ketubah starts at the time of the marriage. The woman has a legal claim to the husband's properties from the time of the marriage, and so her mortgage, the lien that is owed to her starts then, and not from the date on the get. The get is just now if you're divorced, now you can go and collect it, and so that will not be a problem for according to the Bishimon. Predated get is fine because it will not have any financial ramifications. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now, Itmar, mipnei ma tiknu gizman begittin. And now a general question. Why did the rabbis say that you need to write a date in the get? So it's important. All this is rabbinic, that you have to write a date at all. So two reasons. In case someone is married to his niece. This is just for example. And here's the scenario. Let's say a person is married to his niece and she is not faithful. And let's say it's in front of witnesses and all that, and she'll be taken out to be given capital punishment. Now, the husband in this case, even though he's probably upset that his niece was not faithful to him, nevertheless, it is still family, and he wants to be on good terms with his brother, and he's not going to want to see his niece killed by capital punishment, and therefore, he may step in to save the life of his niece. How is he going to do that? He will write a predated get from the day before she was unfaithful, and then he can produce the get, and they say, oh, look, I actually divorced her before she committed adultery, and that way save her life. Now, the niece would be just an example, and we could refer to any other case where the husband, for whatever reason, even though she committed adultery, would not want her to die. He can forge a get that's really after the fact and present it as if it happened before the adultery. So according to Yochanan, that's why a predated get is no good. Shakish amar mishum perot. He says it's because of produce of nichse melog. This is property that the wife brings into the marriage, she owns. And while they're married, the husband has a right to take and sell the produce and use the proceeds for the household. But that's only as long as they're married. Once they're divorced, however, the proceeds go back to the wife. Now, if there's no date on the get, this will present a problem to the wife, because the husband may go ahead and take produce even after they're divorced, and then she will come to make a claim and say, hey, he took more produce even after he gave me the divorce paper. And then the court will say, well, when were you divorced? And there's no date on the get, so she won't be able to prove the date of divorce, and then she won't be able to reclaim that produce that he took. And therefore the rabbi said, you better put a date on the get so that she can reclaim. Now, this doesn't here explain yet why a predated get is no good, but by the same logic, a predated get could be to the wife's advantage and be difficult for the husband, because then she can go and claim, look, we were already divorced from a day before, and then she would say, give me back the produce, even though he didn't actually give the get yet, and they weren't actually yet divorced, and so she would be illegally taking back produce that really belonged to him. But we're going to see in just a minute, when does the produce stop going to the husband? Is it at the time of writing, or is it at the time of signing? So we're going to see all that coming up now. All right, Resh Lakish, my tama lo amar ki Rabbi Yochanan. How come Rabbi Lakish doesn't agree with the reason of Rabbi Yochanan? This is a good reason. Anytime someone commits adultery, you can always save the person by writing a get and putting a date on it, or putting no date on it and saying, oh yeah, I gave it to this before. So of course you have to write a date, so that if someone committed adultery, then we have to know whether it was before or after the date. You need an accurate date on the get. How come Resh Lakish doesn't agree? Amalach zenut la shechicha. Adultery is not frequent, and even if it happened, it has to be frequent with witnesses, and they're going to give her capital punishment. All that for sure is infrequent. Hopefully, any zenut is also infrequent, and so the rabbis don't have to go and make a whole gezerah just for a case that might happen once in a blue moon. How come Rabbi Yochanan doesn't agree with the reasoning of Resh Lakish that we need a date so that we can establish when the produce of a field goes from the husband and is given back to the wife. Because Rabbi Yochanan thinks that the time that the husband, he said that the husband continues to receive perot until the giving of the get, even after the writing of the get. Therefore, the date that you write on the get doesn't matter anyway, because you can write a get one day, and then it may be a day, it may be many days until it's actually given. And so, even if you write a date on the get, it will not be relevant to the produce. And so, if the wife says, "Oh, he took the produce for more days than he was supposed to," well, she's going to have to bring evidence, no matter what, about the date that she received the get. And so the date that's written on the get is not actually going to help her. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan does not agree with the reasoning of Resh Lakish. All right. Bishlam el Resh Lakish mishum hachi kamachshir Rabbi Shimon. Now we're going to try to explain the reasoning behind the machloket in the Mishnah between Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. And we can explain it just fine according to the a reason of Resh Lakish, that we're worried about the perot. And this is why Rabbi Shimon would say it's a predated get is kosher, because Rabbi Shimon thinks that the produce goes from being his back to being hers from the time of the writing of the get, not the giving of the get. And since it goes by the time of the writing of the get, so all you need is that the date on the get is the correct date of when the get was written. And that way it can be used as proof correctly to say, listen, the wife will bring it and say, look, this says on the date on the get is right here. It says I get the produce back from this date, and that will in fact be true, even if the giving happens several days later. And so, according to the Rabbi Shimon, according to Resh Lakish, he can explain Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbanan follow the date of the giving. The produce goes from him to her at the date that it's given, and that's why it's a problem if if it's written on a different date than it's given. Then, according to the Shakish, she will be able to collect before she has a right to take back the produce. According to the Rabbi Shimon, there's no problem because she deserves the produce from the time it's written. So good. That Rabbi Shakish can explain both sides in the Mishnah. El Rabbi Yochanan, my tamad Rabbi Shimon machshir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who says the reason is that we're afraid that a husband will protect his niece and write a get after she commits adultery, write a get and pass it off as if it's beforehand. Well, Rabbi Shimon should worry about the very same thing, and he won't be able to. Why should it be allowed? We should worry that he's going to write if you're going to require a date and Rabbi Shimon does require a date here. Just he's okay if it's written earlier. But how could you say it's okay if it's written earlier? But then it will get someone who committed adultery off the hook. Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan, aliba Rabbi Shimon la ka'amina, ki ka'amina aliba de Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, you're right. I was never trying to explain the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. I was explaining only the opinion of the rabbis. The rabbis say that you can't have a predated get because then you can use it to get a woman who committed adultery off the hook. For Rabbi Shimon, he follows Resh Lakish's opinion, right? And so now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we can explain the difference between Rabbanan and Rabbi Yochanan would be parallel to the two different reasons. Rabbi Yochanan says you need a date there so that you don't get people off the hook for adultery, and that's why it has to be the correct date of when it's signed and written. And according to Rabbi Shimon, he says it has to do with produce, and he follows his own opinion that produce is transferred at the time of writing. So now everything's good for Rabbi Yochanan. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan hainu di'ika ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan el Resh Lakish ma'ika ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. So now back to Resh Lakish. What is the essence of what's the machloket about? What's the essence of the machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbanan? And the answer, as we already said, is Pered Mishat Ketiba shat chatima ika benaihu. The difference is who deserves to get the produce from the time of writing until the time it's being given. According to the Rabbi Shimon, the produce goes back to her at the time of writing, and therefore the relevant date is the date that is being written, and that's why a predated get is good, according to the Rabbi Shimon. Whereas according to the Rabbanan, the produce goes back to the wife at the time of the giving, and therefore if you have the date not of when it's given, then she will use that to take produce that actually does not belong to her, and that is the problem. All right, so now we understand how to read the Mishnah according to both of these opinions. Last problem, Rabbi Yochanan amar mishat ketibah, Rish Lakish amar mishat netina. Hold on, we have a tradition that switches these opinions around and says, when can the wife take back the produce from her nichse melog, from her property that she owns? Rabbi Yochanan says from the time of writing. Well, that's the opposite, because just now we said Rabbi Yochanan explains Rabbanan, and they only explain Rabbanan, who says it's from the time of giving. And in this version, Rabbi Yochanan says from the time of writing. That's not right. And the Shakish here says from the time of giving. But look, right up here, Resh Lakish said that the produce transfers either at the time of writing, according to Rabbi Shimon, or signing, according to the Rabbanan. So there's actually three different time periods that are important. Here, Resh Lakish says the writing, the signing. He doesn't say anything about giving. And now Resh Lakish is being quoted to talk about the time of the giving of the get. And so now we have a problem for both of them, and the answer is ipuch. Take this tradition and flip them around, and in fact it is the Resh Lakish that says from the time of writing. This is a little bit problematic because Rabbi Shimon that says writing, so maybe he follows Rabbi Shimon, in our opinion. Maybe when he says writing, he means writing, signing, maybe he means the signing, okay, and Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says the giving, which is in fact what he said earlier, and that way we can reconcile the various statements of Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.